and welcome back to the Impact Defense Podcast, Season 2, Episode 4. I said it all again.
You got it right.
Yes.
Good job.
Again, you haven't done it yet.
We got that on the first take.
All right, guys, before we dive in too deep with this episode, don't forget about our sponsor, Blackout Coffee.
Of which Kylie's had a ton.
You can go to impactgear.live/coffee to get yours today and use the coupon code ImpactDefense will get you 10% off your order.
And I'm going to do that when I leave because this is pretty good coffee.
Yeah. All right, if you're hearing an extra voice, that is because we are joined today by Brandon Wolfe. You're good with me saying first and last names.
Oh, yeah,
and all
absolutely.
The other things,
Yeah,
right?
just dox me. Yeah. You can get my address, everything
Your
like
address,
that. Yeah.
credit card number, social security. We're going.
I got my social card right here. Yeah,
All
we
right,
can do
cool.
that. Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Just tag me on Facebook in it.
If you have listened to the podcast for a good amount of time, Brandon was actually on our earlier podcast when it was me and like 4 preachers, and we sat down to talk about church security, and that was a very fun podcast. And I said I wanted to try to figure out a way to have some of those guys back on, or all of those guys back on. We enjoyed everybody. But Brandon and I have a connection that's a little different than just the fact that he's a preacher and a friend. He was actually my first martial arts teacher as well.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and Brian was my first Christian friend whenever I got saved. Yeah, that was awesome story. We can tell you all about it sometime. But yeah, it's just been a blessing. This whole family is a blessing to me, and we love you guys. So happy to do whatever you ask me to do.
Awesome.
Yep.
Then that means I need to ask more. Okay.
Here comes the social security number.
Kylie had an awesome idea, I thought, for a podcast because we actually have gotten. So I had a very interesting question, and that was Jesus taught people to turn the other cheek.
Yes.
So how can you be out here teaching people to hit people in self-defense if Jesus told people to turn the other cheek? Aren't you going against your own religion? That was what I was asked. Kylie jumped on this big time, and she's like, we have to do a podcast on this.
Oh, yeah.
And then we both said we knew the perfect person to bring on here. So,
oh gosh,
here you are.
Where's he at? And he couldn't show up, so I came. Yeah, man, that's an awesome question. It's a question I think every Christian probably struggles with to one extent or another, but I don't think it's an unclear question in the Bible either.
Right.
Just start off where you started. I guess we're in it now. So, but start off with what you're starting with, in the Matthew 5 context where he says, turn the other cheek. That has nothing to do with taking a physical blow. That's an insult. It's a backhanded comment kind of deal. It's taking an insult and allowing somebody just don't retaliate because somebody's insulting you.
Hey, I think we've had a whole podcast basically on the topic of just, trying to avoid things. And
yeah,
part of that is just ignoring people's stupid comments.
Yeah. And I mean, any law enforcement officer that you talk to that's worth his salt, I mean, that's not which, 99.9% of them are. Yeah. They've been trained to not let the words hurt them. Yeah. The person can sit there and they can mouth off to them all day. It's not hurting them at all. They'll be fine. Yeah. They don't have to do anything. Now, when that person comes toward them aggressively, then it's, another story. But, it's the same principle there. I mean, that right there, if that was all you want to do a talk about, we would do the shortest podcast ever with a preacher on. But honestly, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. Jesus is talking about an insult there. It's not a way of life that doesn't protect, your own personal property or your own family or sticking up for the weak or the helpless or something like that. Those are bigger discussions that come into the biblical play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole mindset of, I think that goes to a cultural phenomenon too, where Christians are often thought of as having to be doormats and things of that nature. And it's because people, in all honesty, want us to be. They want us to roll over and, right. Not speak up and not do the right thing. But that is not Christianity. Right. Christianity is not being a doormat at all. It is not a violent religion at all. It's not.
But I mean, you're not
converts by force or anything.
Right. You're in no way called to sit back and do nothing while someone, destroys your home and hurts your family and
right.
or even yourself,
right.
It's fine.
Right.
To actually defend yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So. I mean, you could go like principle speaking, as a believer, your body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. I mean, if you're doing things to preserve that body in some sort of meaningful way with your diet and exercise routine, then obviously just giving that over to somebody else to stab or shoot is not really a good preservative for it.
My normal thing that I would say to somebody, and I have said to somebody when they said something to me, because this is not the first time, this was just something.
Sure. And it won't be the last. No. we won't clarify every question today, I'm sure.
We have,
maybe we will.
We talked about this the other day, you and I. This is 20 years that we've been like running a school, and that's crazy. But anyway, looking back, I've had that question several times, and one of the things that I have said many times is like, yeah, he said turn the other cheek, but he also like tossed tables and drove people out of
that's right
with a whip.
That's right.
So
yeah. What would Jesus do? He'd love his enemies and he'd turn over some tables and make a whip. I mean, I mean, seriously, it's not violence, and that's I think something people have to really distinguish between. I don't think our culture has a how do you say it? They don't have compartments to put things in anymore. It's all or none.
That's true.
And so they're always saying any act of violence is war. It's hurting somebody else. It's creating a victimhood mentality. All these other things.
Well, you don't have to even be violent to be violent now.
No, you can just say something or think something,
or not say something,
or not say something and not think the way they want you to.
So
and
words are violent and silence is violent. And
right. Yeah.
We're getting off on a tangent here.
Yeah. No, we can fix all the world's problems today.
It's going to take longer than a 25-minute podcast, though.
It actually won't. They just all have to listen. It's like we can solve this thing in 30 minutes, y'all. But even I was doing some research on this myself. I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, because I had questions about like violence in the Christian life and where that's at. And when we talked about church security teams, I actually had people legitimately come to me and say, at one point, so it was several years ago I did this research, but somebody came to me and said, I'm not sure how I feel about a safety team, security team, and God's house on Sunday looking to, shoot a bad guy. And I said, whoa, hang on. That's not the point. We're not here to shoot a bad guy.
Right.
Those sort of things are last resorts, right?
And that's
that's not even
way down the list.
That's like the top priority of a safety team is not that anyway. Yeah. Yes, they need to be prepared for that worst case scenario that could eventually happen, but that's not what they worry about majority of the time. And so I had this opportunity to go through scripture with this person and say, well, here, I want you to see, what the Bible says about this idea of defending and things like that. And, it kind of struck me that the first act of violence, I guess you would say, in the Bible was committed by God himself. And that was, in Genesis chapter 3, where Adam and Eve had sinned. And the first thing that he does is he clothes them with skin of an animal. Well, that animal didn't live when he took the skin off.
Yeah.
And so that immediately sets the precedence that there is a way to preserve life, even at the expense of something else. It sets the precedence that done in the right way, it can be. And of course, you've got, extreme examples. You got Genesis 4, you got a guy named Lamech who, a little kid slaps him, so he kills him. So, that's the extreme, like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the whole point of that is don't do that. Go all the way to Genesis 9, and, if somebody takes a life, their life should be taken, those sort of things. It's almost just assumed in Scripture. It never has to really come out and said that, you're allowed to defend yourself and you're allowed to defend your family and, your own property and things like that. It's just assumed,
Yeah.
I think it was Exodus 22. I wanted to make sure I got the addresses right because I didn't want to mess this up. I need your glasses. I'm just kidding. So it's Exodus 22, verses 2 to 3. And I can look that up and read it if you want me to. But basically in that context, it says that, look, if somebody breaks into your house and they die because they broke into your house, then you're not guilty.
Yeah.
It's a self-defense context. It's like, if they do this at night, like they're meaning mischief, and that's the idea. Now, there are prohibitions against taking it too far in the nation of Israel when God was setting that up. You can't chase them down and, once they've made it to a city of refuge or whatever that was, once they've been apprehended, you can't just go find them and stab them to death, But, and then all throughout the Bible, it's like, go through the Old Testament. You watch these people, the judges, right? they are people who are defending the nation of Israel, right? And some of them are doing it in really gross ways. My little boy, my middle son, my middle kid son, Luke, he's left-handed. And so he asked me one day about anybody in the Bible who was left-handed. So I took him. To the Book of Judges, and I didn't read it because that's not really, that's like rated R territory for a kid. But I told him about Ehud, the left-handed judge. He's like, "Well, what did he do?" And I was like, "Well, he stuck a knife so far in a fat guy's belly that the guy died." He's like, "Cool." So I was like, "Yeah." Then he stunk. But just stuff like that. You just, there's an assumption there that there's a line that's drawn that people can't cross.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, there would have to be a conscience issue at play for people. Definitely. I mean, they would have to make sure that they're okay with, taking the steps that they need to take to defend themselves and things like that. But biblically speaking, there's nothing wrong with self-defense whatsoever. It's assumed,
Yeah.
I mean, especially when it comes to other people who can't stick up for themselves, who can't put up a fight. I mean, we're not sitting here, just talking about your general attack against one of us. I mean, we're talking about your attacks against your family.
Right.
So when you have that kind of situation arise, it's expected that you would step up, to defend those who can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, you'd be in the nation of Israel, you'd be treated as an outcast.
I mean, if you don't stick up for your family, you're a coward and and basically useless. I mean,
right.
But anyway,
Right.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, you're good. No, but that's the truth. I mean, there's an assumption built into all this that you're supposed to look out for those who can't look out for themselves. You're supposed to not let this perpetrator go to that nth degree on you or whatever. We've got the law, and we've got law enforcement and things like that are designed to help perform the punishments, later on. But the assumption in Scripture is that you're not always going to have that law enforcement personnel right beside you when you get attacked. So you have to do whatever you've got to do.
Well, we tell this, and like we teach seminars all the time, and I'll be teaching seminars all day tomorrow, self-defense seminars, and one of the things we always tell them is basically the national average is 9 to 11 minutes when you call the police to them to actually show up. And it depends on where you are in the country, because some places are a lot worse. And, but 9 to 11 minutes. It's easy to remember because you call 911, you can expect them to be there in 9 to 11
9 to 11,
minutes.
right.
We always ask people, are you prepared to have a 10-minute fight for your life until the cops get there?
Right. Can you just keep somebody from hurting you for 10 minutes?
Right.
That's the thing. The more shots like we trained all along, the more you allow somebody to attack, the more likelihood they're going to land one of those.
Exactly.
Are you just going to be able to block things for 10 minutes? Nobody can,
No, gosh, no. We do that a lot too. We show our students, we'll sit there and we'll say, okay, have somebody get on the ground and then have somebody sit on top of them and just start throwing punches. And at first you can block most of the punches.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something slips through.
Right.
And once one has slipped through, more is going to slip through and more will slip through.
Right.
And it just gets harder and harder. And, if you're trying to sit there and do that and wait for somebody to come and rescue you, you're probably going to get beat up.
Well, it's like the great theologian Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until he gets punched in the face. And that's reality. Like
that's the truth. Yeah,
your plan may work well to just stand there and hold your arms up, but one's going to get in. So what do you do next? Now, if you're a person who's that docile and you're that willing to sort of show your belly and you think you can do that and honor the Lord, I'm not going to chastise you for it. I'm just going to say probably don't go out in public at night. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to make that decision.
Yeah.
It's better to have what you need and not need it than to not have it and then need it.
Yeah. I like Jordan Peterson said something that I really liked, and we actually put it on a quote and put it on our Facebook feed, and we got some flack for it, but I don't care.
Isn't that awesome? Wear it like a badge.
But basically, it says a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a dangerous man who keeps it under wraps.
That's
basically.
Right.
That's not
right.
his exact words, but that's basically. So, of course, people take that to the extreme. It's like, oh, so you're saying like people in wheelchairs are not good.
Right, right, of course.
People.
Again, people don't have categories to think.
Yeah.
Even in our Little Giants class, whenever we're going through like a grappling month and we're doing the trap and roll escape, I be sure that I tell them whenever we're doing it, are you going to get hit? Are you going to block every strike? Is basically the question that I ask them.
Right.
And they go, no.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can get a 3 to 6 year old to understand that.
Yeah. That's literally my goal, is to ask them these questions And for them to actually answer it and follow through with that whenever they're older
Yeah.
is the type of deal. Just building up that foundation that they know early on.
Yeah.
Right.
And whenever, are you going to block every strike? And then are you going to stop whenever you get hit? They go, no.
Right.
Because I've told them that so many times. You got to keep going even whenever it's hard.
Yeah.
Is one of the things I'd be sure that I pressure on them.
Yeah, that's a little off
Right.
subject of the podcast, but that's been a new goal of ours, just for like the kids' classes, especially. We want to build some resilience.
Yeah.
I think people that have resilience, kids that have resilience as children, and then grow into adulthood, are going to rule this world in a few years. The way
Yes.
things are going.
Yes. Well, and I'm telling you, there is nothing better for a kid to learn than to lose and learn to get punched in the face in a very controlled environment.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, you tell people that, I know teaching people, when I have somebody who's got a kid who's got some sort of learning disability, I'm like, martial arts. Get them in martial arts.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? I don't want to give them formal training. I'm like, I know, but what you're doing is you're controlling that. You're focusing that, and that's what they need. They need a place for this, and they need it constructive, and they need to learn how to do it and how not to do it. And then they blossom. You see that. I mean, there's rarely an occasion where there's a kid who's just too far into the aggressive nature that you just can't teach him. I never found one, but you've been teaching longer than I did, so.
Okay, so I have another quick question.
Okay.
And only because we've gone through this a little faster than I expected us to.
Right.
So far. And I'm sure you have more, but
I'm a preacher. I always have more.
but just out of curiosity, because this is another one that I get all the time, and my thing is like, well, it's a sport. People know that, hey, I fought mixed martial arts and kickboxing,
Right.
and I fought full contact.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, how can you do that and be a Christian? I'm like, it's a sport.
It's a sport.
We both get into a ring expecting
Have you seen
to
what
punch each other
football
in the
players
face.
do to each other?
I know.
And like we pay them, and people like buy their jerseys, and it's a sport.
Yeah.
It's a sport. I mean, again, it's anything, right? Like you can take something really good and make it really stupid quick if you're the wrong person. And there's people like that in every sport. You know, you had your Dennis Rodmans and basketball, and you got your
Dating yourself a little bit. there.
a little bit. I know. It's pretty sad for anybody who doesn't know who that is. Just Google it or look it up in your Encyclopedia Britannica.
He was a phenomenal rebounder.
He was a good rebounder.
He was good.
Really good rebounder. Really bad person. Like
man, he was everything they needed at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he got he got the attention, right? I mean, he turned it into WWE kind of thing, right? So you have him, and you got your wackos in the NFL who are like getting in trouble for having all this money and doing stupid stuff with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got all that, and you got your crazy people in mixed martial arts. I mean, you got people who just want to get into the sport to bully people. They got beat up as a kid. They want to beat somebody up.
Yep.
I mean, okay, yeah, that happens. You can't judge the entire genre or somebody else's intentions based on what somebody does stupid with it.
Right.
Yep. It's the same thing. And plus, something like that, the value of martial arts, not the religious aspect of it, but the value of teaching somebody to be able to control themselves, to focus themselves, to be able to put certain things in certain places at the right time, to do all that. You need people in that industry, in that fighting, to temper those idiots.
Yeah.
You need somebody who can go in there as a sport, take a few good licks, give a few good licks, and walk away and be like, I don't hate you.
Yeah.
Because it's just a sport. I mean, and that was sort of the thing that people were shocked always by in martial arts when I was teaching. And I'm sure they are with you too. Like that you can put these people together, put some pads on them, and they can kick the full crap out of each other sometimes.
Well, we've done that.
Yeah, right.
And
we've
laughing
done
the
it.
whole time.
And laughing, right? Yeah. Oh gosh, I've been knocked out here. I've been, my worst knee injury. The reason my knee aggravates me to this day is because of martial arts, because of a stupid thing that me and another guy decided to do, and it didn't work out so well for me. You made this arm longer than this one.
I told that story last night.
That was awesome. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure I've never done anything to you violently. But anyway, I don't think I ever got anything good on you. Yeah.
No, you've hit me well. I mean, I can't
Yeah,
think of
I think I
anything
hit
like
you.
majorly that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm just gonna call it we'll call it a tie. Okay, so but I mean, it's like all those things, and then to be able to laugh about it and to get up and realize that it's not personal. Like that's the kind of people you want in culture.
Yeah.
Like you want people who can have wonderful, genuine conversations with each other, who can disagree vehemently and still walk away and say, you know what? Hey, we're still both human beings.
There was a guy, my first like bigger fight in mixed martial arts. I fought this dude who was a good solid weight class over me. And I fought too heavy the first time I did that. But anyway, I fought this guy and he broke my nose.
Yeah.
And I choked him out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it was bad, man. I bled all over the place. We had a really good kind of back and forth fight. They said that was fight of the night kind of thing. But he got up after it was all over, and he walked up after, it was announced I won. And he says, this is why I love this sport. He said, we sit here and threw everything at each other that we could for this time.
Yeah.
And now we can just be best friends.
Right.
There's
Right.
no animosity.
Yeah.
And as long as you're with the right people, there's no animosity,
Exactly. That's the thing.
I try to explain that to people too. Like if you get into a fight and you have animosity in that fight, if you can't like separate yourself from that,
Right.
especially sport fighting,
Right.
you're going to get the crap beat out of you.
Oh yeah, you're going to take it way too personal.
Yeah.
And then when you take it personal, you're going to make bad decisions, and then you're going to lose every single time. And there was never a time when you and I were fighting that we ever looked at it like, oh man, I'm gonna make sure like he doesn't walk away from this today.
Right.
But there was no holding back either.
Yeah.
We had rules, we had a parameter sort of set ourselves in, and we're like, okay, you realize like if I knock you out, it's okay, and if you knock me out, it's okay. Like it was just unspoken.
Yeah.
It was cool. We were all right with that.
I knocked my brother out one night doing that kind of stuff.
There you go.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I've heard that story multiple times.
Yeah.
It's a funny story.
Those are fun stories. So yeah, I mean, it's a sport, it's a sport. I mean, if people don't like it because they feel like it's violent, then they don't understand the intention behind it.
Right.
I mean, you cannot say violence exists there and doesn't exist in the NFL or
Right.
doesn't exist in boxing.
I've never tied the NFL thing to that. I like that because
Yeah.
it really football. Most NFL players have a lot more injuries.
Oh yeah.
Than fighters.
The majority of them, and you could probably find some really cool statistics on this. So I would be
I've seen
scared
some before,
to
but yeah.
even say, but I mean, I would have to say, just like my gut would say, the majority of NFL players carry long-term damage that the minority of fighters do.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see it equaling out. Now, of course, you got a bigger spectrum to pull from, but still, I mean, the intention of the NFL is that like you've got 7, 8, 9 guys who their design is to hit each other as hard as they can to keep that line going,
Yeah.
So that's not going to end well for anybody long term.
You do it repeatedly and repeatedly.
Yeah.
That's why
See
one
them
of
guys
the,
come out. I'm going to Disney World. No, you're going to the hospital, son. You got a concussion.
And I do get a lot of flack because I'm not a fan of boxing for the primary reason, or kickboxing for that matter. Because
Right.
people get knocked down and then they're allowed to stand back up. Your brain is already concussed.
Yeah.
You've already sustained a brain injury, and now they go, okay, I'm going to give you a standing 8 count. Go back in there and do it again. And that's why I was like, I didn't do much in the kickboxing round.
Right.
I was like, I don't want to be somebody with long-term brain damage from
Right.
just getting repeated like knocked back down and back up and everything else.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and you made that statement earlier about Jordan Peterson, that quote that you put online about that. What was that again? Can you say it again?
So a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a dangerous man who has it under control.
Okay, that is biblical. That's blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
Like when Jesus talks about meekness, and when you talk about meekness in the Bible, or gentleness, some translations will say it, it's got nothing to do with weakness.
Yeah.
It is power under control.
Yeah.
That's what that word really means. And so that is the most beautiful thing, because it is mimicked and modeled in Jesus,
Yeah.
who had all the power in this universe but controlled it. And so, it's the same thing with us as his followers. It's power under control. So it's not, weakness, and it's not, again, the doormat mentality.
Yeah.
It's that you have it, and you have it for the right reason. And again, like you said, I mean, if you can't even do that for your own family, like how, I don't understand, There was a, go ahead, you got a story.
So back in November, a guy was coming. This is in California, by the way.
Okay.
A guy was coming at home to his house and saw 2 intruders at his house, and one of the intruders stuck a gun at his side, and the homeowner, who had a family to think about in there because he had a 5-month-old baby and a mom on the other side of that door.
Yeah.
So he turned around and got his gun out and started firing back at them. They left, But now the California government has punished the homeowner and temporarily took away his right to bear an arm.
That sounds like California.
Their arms.
Sorry
Bear
for those
arms.
listening from California, but you know.
And protect his family. That story kind of made me mad.
It should.
Yeah.
It should. Well, and
You
my thought
shouldn't-
is, go ahead. You
You shouldn't
finish
be
it.
punished for something like that, especially whenever you have others to think about.
Right.
He wasn't just going willy-nilly. He was trying to protect his family, his house, his property.
Yeah,
It was self-defense.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't use firearms to protect your house and property, though.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But his family, his wife, his child.
yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And that's where I think, with like our state, the laws are if, somebody can reasonably say that they would have acted the same way in your circumstance, or they can reasonably say that you did feel threatened, or you had somebody else in your family in your immediate vicinity threatened, then that's the self-defense law with firearms.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? Like if somebody has a gun, like I have a gun, right? And I carry.
You
right?
have a
no,
gun?
I know. I've got like a few. So I don't carry because like it's comfortable and because it makes me feel better or anything like that. I carry, and I don't carry all the time either, so I break that rule too. But like when I do, it's because I know that there are other people out there who have guns and they have very devious thoughts in their mind, and they are broken individuals, and they're messed up, and they're evil, and they're wicked. And if they pull theirs, I know that I can't outfight them. And I really don't. It's not about me at the end of the day. Like the only time I ever carry in those situations is because my family's with me. That's it. It's just because of them. And so it's the same kind of thing there. Like if you are defending your family, then why be punished?
Exactly.
Like you've got somebody who already made the first move, and you don't know their intentions. Like they may have an
Right.
empty gun. They may have just like got up and
They
decided to
could
do
have
this
used
thing.
it as an
and
intimidation
It
tool.
could have been intimidation, but you
either
don't know
way,
that.
Right.
yeah.
Like you don't have that. I mean, once somebody makes that cross in their mind that they're going to use this,
Their life has
for
already been
whatever.
threatened.
Yes, exactly. If somebody makes that decision that they're going to make that move towards you, they've already decided that they're entering into a realm where death is possible.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
They've already
And-
entered that mindset that they have to protect.
Yes, exactly. And so there's no real reason to punish somebody for defending their family,
Right.
Things like that. I don't understand that at all. I mean,
Me
and we're not
neither.
talking about those extreme examples like government overreach or something like that. We're talking about individual, personal,
Right.
self-defense.
Yep.
I mean, and you've got that just illustrated all throughout Scripture. And how many battles was God involved in, right? And people look at that and they're like, "Oh, I don't like that. That's violent." Well, I mean, hey, look, God had a purpose in that, and that'd be another episode for you, whatever you wanted to do. But I mean, just honestly, you just look at that. You got like Psalm 144, like He trains my fingers for battle.
Yeah.
I mean, He gives me this. This is a way that I can glorify Him. You can defend the weak, and you can help the helpless. You're made in the image of God. You're protecting other image bearers. I mean, there's a level of all of this that has to be taken into account, and nobody should punish. I understand having to have rules so that you don't have vigilantes and things like that, but
They didn't do anything to the two people that.
yeah, that's the bother. That's the
Yeah.
bother, right? That's the part that's like,
That makes perfect sense.
yeah. I mean, the two
Let a
people.
criminal go out.
Yeah.
That was actually another situation that was mentioned in the video that I watched about that. Was a lawyer let a killer out early, and then they killed another person.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably happens more times than we are told about, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing. And I've got a friend who's he's not a Christian, but he likes to use Christianity for whenever it's convenient for him.
Yeah.
So
I
one of the
understand.
convenient aspects he likes is when he thinks that Christianity is against Republicans, or when he thinks that Christianity teaches him to be nonviolent. And so he kind of takes it that way. And he's told me about an encounter he had one day. He was walking in a very bad place in Winston, which he wasn't a really wise idea to be walking at the time of day he was in that area, just because what goes on. But
Use common sense, people.
just use common sense. Right, yeah, you got a brain, use it, So he was walking, and he noticed a guy sort of cut across the street and start following him. And so he said he immediately felt kind of off about it. He felt weird and things like that. And he did a good thing. I was really proud of him for what he did. He turned around and he engaged the guy, because he just thought to himself, he's like, I'm just going to see if I can't just like talk to this guy, because if this is, I don't know what his intentions are, but I at least want to face him. I want to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
He wasn't thinking to defend himself. He was just thinking, I want to see this man. And
Yeah.
so he turned around, walked right up to him and talked to him. How you doing? You know, have a good day, all that stuff. And he walked away. But then he made this big, huge thing about it. Like, see, that's all you've got to do to stop violence.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm like, no, there's not the two. There's not the same thing, bud.
When
like,
an active shooter comes in and starts shooting up a mall, walk straight up to him and then talk to him. Say, hey, listen, let's think this through a minute.
Yeah, and be sure that you wear a shirt with a big target on it.
Yeah.
That way, I mean, you will help other people in that area because he'll unload more rounds into you that he can't use on somebody else. Yeah, that's just, and again, in that situation, that's situational awareness, right? That's stuff that you teach. That's what people need to have too. That's self-defense.
Right.
We just did a podcast about like the differences between being aware.
Hang on, I'm answering an email. I'm just kidding. No, I'm looking up a Bible verse. It's okay.
We just did a podcast on the differences between being aware and being paranoid, because sometimes people put being aware as being paranoid. They put those two together, which in reality they mean two different things.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And if you can learn that, you'll be a much more confident person that gets you in and out of situations. Because people, you know, I mean, it's statistically, perpetrators always look for the preoccupied, the distracted, the
one stuck in their phone, two earbuds. Not paying
looking down all
attention
the
on the aisle that
time.
they're on.
Yeah, that person who's walking around sort of like just covering themselves up, you know, physically. Like they got, you know, 3 blankets on them. They're just trying to hide under their blankets in broad daylight or whatever. Like the lack of confidence is what somebody sees, you know. Yeah, and I was just looking up a verse, and it was in the book of Nehemiah. And I like Nehemiah for a lot of things because it's not a theocratic kind of book. And what you mean by that is like, you know, the Old Testament law, God had a theocracy. So he was like ruling the nation. So a lot of people might look at the Old Testament passages and they say, well, that was when God was ruling Israel. Now he's got a totally different version of that. Well, first of all, that's never overwritten in the New Testament. There are things that are moral responsibilities that are brought about in the Old Testament that are maintained in the New Testament, you know? And so the moral law of, sure, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of deal. Yeah, absolutely. And not taking your own vengeance, but the moral law of self-defense is also still in force in the New Testament with that whole mindset. But then Nehemiah comes along, you know, and Nehemiah is getting all these death threats and things like that. And he actually is talking about in chapter 4 where he gets some death threats. And it says that the way he handled that was to station men in certain exposed areas and station people in families with their swords and spears and bows. And so like he equipped people to defend themselves while they were doing this work, you know? Yeah. And I mean, a sword, a spear, and a bow, it's not farming tools. Yeah. I mean, that's not, let's just be honest. You know, there was no theocracy here. This was just a group of people who were existing together, and they were trying to do God's work. Yeah. And he said, look, it's just a reality. We got people who don't like us. Be ready to defend yourself. Yep. It's a perfect illustration for this. Yeah. Again, you got, you know, you've got vengeance, you've got overkill, all those things, but still, I mean, there's an assumption to defend yourself. Yeah.
I actually think that's a great way to end the podcast. This
that
episode.
Is.
Thank you very much for coming out, and I hope to have you on another one before the season's over.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the privilege. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and click that like button, subscribe, and write us a review and share it with your friends, because we're back.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.